Well, now we've heard from what the people think, we've heard about the polls, we've heard the view from a Labour MP. Let's talk now to a former Conservative MP. Stephen Dorrell was a Conservative MP for 36 years. Indeed, he was Health Secretary as well, and has obviously seen a number of Tory leaders come and go and seen a number of scandals in his time as well. Welcome to the programme, Stephen. First of all, how does this scandal for Boris Johnson compare to various other scandals that we've seen from other Conservative leaders?
Well, first of all, I should say that I'm no longer a member of the Conservative Party, so I obviously have a political view in this as well. But I in my lifetime, I cannot think of a Prime Minister who is more open to the charge that he regards himself as outside the rules, above the law, and responsible for making rules that apply to other people, you and me, but don't apply to him. I can think of no Prime Minister in my lifetime who is more open to that charge, and against whom there is more evidence that that is how he behaves.
Now, of course, a lot of people were saying this about Boris Johnson before he became Prime Minister. He had record low approval ratings from one half of the public, people who tended to vote Remain, but pretty high approval ratings amongst those who voted Leave. He has, for the time at which he has been Prime Minister, been a divisive figure, I suppose, in that sense. Some people loving him, some people hating him. Do you see that potentially there may be a way back? He doesn't have to win over the whole country, but just needs to win over those people who supported him so heartily 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's always true that a Prime Minister doesn't need, he or she doesn't need to speak for everybody. They need to speak for a clear section of the electorate. Our voting system doesn't require them even to speak for a majority of the electorate. But they do have to have a broad level of support across the different regions of the country and also across different social groups within the country. And I think the problem that Boris Johnson now faces is that the coalition he put together in the 2019 election, there are important elements of it for whom he is now a figure who, A, is personally distrusted, but B, is also not delivering in terms of the policy and the expectations they had of his government. The commitment to levelling up, the commitment to a global Britain, to looking beyond Brexit and making a different future for our country, none of that is being delivered. Now, partly, of course, that's as a result of the COVID crisis, but also his government isn't developing a set of policies that are capable of delivering the objectives that he set for his government in the 2019 general election.
I suppose one counterpoint to that may be well found on the front page of the Times this morning. Now, most front pages of almost every paper this morning are pretty dire for the Prime Minister in terms of Partygate. But this one story from a leading epidemiologist suggesting that the UK may be the first country in the Northern Hemisphere to exit the pandemic, that we might well have timed unlocking and indeed delivered the booster programme just about the most successfully of any country, and thereby going to endemic rather than pandemic COVID. Could that well, if it turns out to be true, be a big point in favour of this Prime Minister?
I think the jury's still out on that point, but I think that there's some grounds for believing that we're past the Omicron peak in London, and hopefully we'll soon be past it elsewhere in the country, and that we are therefore now needing, rightly, to start to think about how our behaviours need to change and so on to deal with the fact that coronavirus is on the way to becoming endemic if it isn't already endemic. I think the issue then, of course, is going to be advice when the government sets out the implications of that for the way we lead our lives and the expectations that we need to have of each other, of the people in our own communities at times when the virus is in circulation, that's going to be coming from a government led by a man who simply broke his own rules at the time of maximum national crisis. So as Steve McCabe was saying, this is in May 2020 was the time of maximum crisis, when daily press conferences were telling us not simply that this is good behaviour, but this is what the law required. And the Prime Minister is seen to have broken the law. Now, it is the most basic principle of a free country that we all live subject to the same laws.
Certainly a very tricky moment there. I'm afraid we've run up to the end of the programme, but Stephen Dorrell, thank you very much for your thoughts. We really appreciate them this morning.